Adam.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to add my voice to the chorus of opposition to this disastrous and desperate proposal by the government. It's becoming more evident day by day that the Albanese government is long on spin and short on actual detail and genuine reform. While they say that they've got a clear plan, the stark reality is the opposite. This Australian Labor Party is now introducing the legislation despite having made this policy position over 20 months ago. While Australians suffer in the midst of Labor's concurrent housing crisis and cost of living crisis, the introduction of this underwhelming Help to Buy scheme is simply too little too late. The government has already failed to deliver it, a key election policy, it would have seemed, by the nominated start date of 1 January 2023. It won't see the light of day until well into 2024, at the earliest. Notwithstanding the limited and niche nature of this vanilla shared equity product, election policies should be delivered in the timeframe promised. The only housing policies delivering support to first home buyers are the housing policies Labor inherited from the former coalition government. The Australian public have had enough of the government encroaching on their freedoms and involving themselves in their day-to-day lives. We've recently only just emerged from the COVID era, where the government had taken unforeseen and historic measures of intervention in people's day-to-day lives. The last thing that people want now is to have the Albanese Labor government taking a foothold in what would be their pride and joy, their place of residence, their home. When it comes to being effectively tenants in common with the Commonwealth Government, who can trust anything that the Prime Minister says after the recent tax cuts backflip? If this legislation passes, how can a recipient trust the Labor government won't change the rules after settlement? Can you imagine rolling over in the middle of the night and one of the Prime Minister's proxies or the Prime Minister himself is taking up 40% of your bed? Another issue is that the Help to Buy also relies on the involvement of states and territories, with states being required to pass their own legislation to participate in the scheme. Labor went to the election promising to put in place a shared equity scheme. However, they failed to explain that the scheme needs state government approval to operate. This means Labor has made yet another promise that it can't necessarily keep. So what is this Help to Buy? It's a small, niche program open to only 10,000 households each financial year and will cost the Commonwealth $5.5 billion. What we know already is how underwhelming shared equity schemes have been to date across Australia. These schemes are so unwanted by Australians that there are places remaining in each of the available state-based schemes as we speak. For example, there are places in each of the New South Wales Shared Equity Home Buyer Helper Scheme, Victoria's Home Buyer Fund, South Australia's Home Start Shared Equity Option, and in Tasmania's My Home Shared Equity Program. It begs the question, why on earth would the Albanese Labor government seek to introduce yet another shared equity scheme when we know that similar schemes aren't being used by Australians? The answer is quite clear. Labor want to be seen to be doing something without actually delivering anything meaningful. They're currently panicking at the thought of being critiqued for their lack of a plan and have responded with what is effectively a very lacklustre proposal. This bill is far from the silver bullet solution that they were promising young Australians. Key concerns raised about shared equity schemes as a policy for tackling housing affordability are that they may contribute to further growth in house prices artificially, that they may encourage those for whom home ownership may not be the most suitable option to take on undue financial risk, and they divert resources from supporting people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Those who want to buy a home want to own it themselves. They don't want the government owning a portion, and they really don't want people like the Prime Minister or the Minister for Housing sitting with them at the kitchen table. Where will it end? Will they be there when there are big moments for the family? Perhaps attending funerals attending weddings. I mean, if they're there for 40% of your home, what's next? It seems hardly reasonable that if you own a property jointly with the government, that it's your responsibility for all the repairs and maintenance on the home. Yet when you sell the home, the government comes and takes their proportion of that appreciated value. All the perks, none of the responsibility. Why is this not surprising, coming from what is an out-of-touch Labor government? After waiting over 20 months for this legislation, this appears to be nothing more than a box-ticking exercise for the Albanese Labor government to say that it's launched its signature housing policy. It is clear from this bare legislation that the government has failed to do the hard work, and we are once again left with more questions than answers. What are the scheme's eligibility criteria? What happens if you make improvements in your home? Will you have to send the government an invoice for repairs and maintenance when it's, for example, a leaky roof, a dripping tap, or will they help mow the lawn? What happens if you earn a cent over the $90,000 for an individual or $120,000 for a couple? Will the government force the sale of your home? Will the ATO be auditing incomes to ensure that they don't earn a cent over that threshold? If you enter one of these shared equity arrangements, what are your reporting obligations? So quite typically, there is absolutely no incentive for an Australian to get ahead, because now we know that the more you earn, the more Labor will tax you, and in addition to that, they will be asking for their share in your home back. What happens if housing prices fall and you're behind on your mortgage payments? Will the government force you to sell that house for less than you paid for it? And what are the property price caps? How many of the 40,000 places will be available in each state and territory? Completely lacking in detail. I mean, is this going to replace the four schemes that I mentioned earlier in my speech, or add to it? We just don't know. But critically, we also don't know which lenders are participating in this scheme and the terms on which they will participate. On this side of the House, we know that Help to Buy may soon equate to force to sell without the right settings in place, and based off this legislation, we simply don't know. What we do know is that every time a participant sells their home, they face up to a 40% housing tax as the government swoops in to take its share. We contrast this to the Coalition's strong record of prioritising home ownership. And, Deputy Speaker, I haven't been in this place very long, and my maiden speech is at the forefront of my mind on issues of things like home ownership for young Australians. And I mentioned it in my maiden speech because it is a critically important component of the lifestyle that Australians deserve. They want to seek the Australian dream, and they should have it. In government, the Coalition has a strong and proud record of supporting Australians to enter the housing market through a range of initiatives pulling on varying economic and financial levers. We understand that owning your home is one of the most important hurdles to reaching the living standards enjoyed by retired Australians. We know that 85% of renters aspire to owning their own home. Home ownership offers security and stability for individuals and families. There is nothing more quintessentially Australian than owning your own home. Over the last 3 years, the Coalition government housing policies have supported more than 300,000 Australians with the purchase of a home. The Coalition has supported almost 60,000 first home buyers and single-parent families into home ownership through the Home Guarantee Scheme, consisting of the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme, the New Home Guarantee and the Family Home Guarantee, with a deposit of as little as 5% or 2% respectively. The Coalition's Home Guarantee Scheme is now supporting 1 in 3 first home buyers. We protected the residential construction industry with more than 137,000 home builder applications, generating $120 billion of economic activity. we provided $2.9 billion of low-cost loans to community housing providers to support 15,000 social and affordable dwellings, saving $470 million in interest payments to be reinvested in more affordable housing. We unlocked 6,900 social, affordable and market dwellings through the $1 billion infrastructure facility to make housing supply more responsive. Since the 1st of January 2020, the home guarantee schemes have assisted almost 60,000 first-home buyers and single-parent families get into a home of their own with a deposit as little as 5% or 2% respectively, a 2019 election commitment that has been delivered. 52% of the 60,000 guarantees issued have been taken up by women, well above the market average of 41% of women entering into home ownership, according to CoreLogic data in 2021. 1 in 5 guarantees issued went to essential workers, almost 35% of which were nurses and 34% teachers. Addressing the deposit hurdle is one of the most challenging aspects of getting on the property ladder, which is why the first home buyers can accelerate their deposit savings through super with an increased release amount of up to $50,000, up from the formal limit of $30,000. This means the average couple would be $20,838 better off under the Coalition's First Home Super Saver scheme than if they saved in a standard savings account. As of March 2022, around 26,800 first-home buyers have released $371 million to purchase their first home. More than 21,100 of these first-home buyers purchased a home after the 2019 election, following Labor's commitment to abolish the scheme. And I remind the House of the 137,000 Australian families that applied for a home builder grant of up to $25,000 if they built a new or substantially renovated home during the COVID pandemic. Home Builder delivered a secure pipeline of construction work that kept hundreds of thousands of tradies and small businesses in work who would have otherwise been facing the unemployment queue. Home Builder broke every record, from the number of dwelling approvals to the number of commencements, and delivered $120 billion of economic activity during our most challenging time, but importantly addressed the supply side of this housing issue. The Coalition Government also established the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation, dedicated to improving housing outcomes by supporting efforts to increase the supply of homes for Australians. This included providing more than $2.9 billion of low-cost loans that saved community housing providers more than $470 million and supported more than 15,000 dwellings. During our last 3 years in government, the Coalition's housing policies aided more than 300,000 Australians in purchasing homes. First home buyer numbers increased from around 100,000 when the Coalition came into office to nearly 180,000 in the last full financial year in government. Our commitment to first home buyers has also been reiterated with the announcement and recommitment to the Super Home Buyer Scheme, which will allow first home buyers to invest up to 40% of their superannuation to a maximum of $50,000 to help with the purchase of their home. Where the current Labor government seeks to encroach on your liberty, your independence and your bank account, only a coalition government will genuinely support self-determination. This bill before the House is simply not fit for purpose and definitely doesn't meet the lofty ambitious agenda that they insisted would be seen in government. The Australian people have been again led up the garden path by this Prime Minister, who desperately needs a solution, and quite frankly, this is not it. Deputy Speaker, for the reasons I've outlined, I support my coalition team in opposing this bill.